every single night when we went to sleep, my mother would put us to sleep with a story, and then with bracha, the Zayda soll sein gesund, the Zayda shall be well. And finally, the Rebbe says, I'll help him to zeh mit the Rebbe. That Hashem should help us to see the Rebbe. Now, we had about as much chance to see a Rebbe, the Rebbe, as you going to Pluto, which isn't a planet anymore. So it was absolutely, and you're wondering, like, what was she thinking?
Welcome to Homesick for Lubavitch, a podcast where we explore Lubavitch identity in the year 2024. My name is Ben Jacobson, and I will be your host. Let's begin. All right, so we are here this afternoon with Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Tzivia Jacobson.
Chaya Tzivia.
Chaya Tzivia Jacobson, matriarch of the Jacobson family. And thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. So let's begin a little bit with the background, with the backdrop. Where do you come from? Who's your family? How did it all begin?
Okay, so I was born in Georgia, Kutaisi in Georgia, Georgia. That's not Georgia, America. It's Russia. And my parents both were. My father's family became Lubavitcher, I think, earlier, and my mother's father, who was a sheikhet, became also Lubavitcher. So we were a Chabad family. When I was born into a Chabad family, and
what was her name?
I was brought up. Yeah, go ahead.
What was her name?
Lipsker.
Lipsker, yeah.
My father was Yaakov. My mother was Luba Alta Toba. Tybal, they called her.
Right.
What was interesting is the reason they landed in Georgia is because his brother, they came from Poltava. His brother was in Georgia, in Georgia, and he wrote them that it's easier to be from there. Stalin did not crack down on Georgia as much as he did in the center of Russia. The whole thing was called Russia. Now it's all separated different countries. But at that time they ruled all of Russia, all the small countries. And so my parents moved there after they got married, and I was born in Kutaisi in Georgia. We were brought up just like in America, as Chassidim. Of course, there it was dangerous. My mother, covered her hair always, but it couldn't be like a tichel, or they didn't have a sheitel, so she wore a fancy little beret. She looked very glamorous, and nobody questioned that she was covering her hair, because you had to explain everything. You couldn't just observe Yiddishkeit freely. But at home, we only spoke Yiddish, and we learned just like at the age of 3, as soon as we could talk, we could make brachas and learned aleph beis. I learned to read. By the time I was 3 years old, I was learning to daven. And then we had a teacher. Later, when we got a little older, we had 2 teachers. One was for Russian and the other one for Limudei Kodesh. So in our home, really, it was a really Chassidish home. We had farbrengens in our house, which was so forbidden. There were more than a dozen Bachrim who were illegally in our city. Now, what does that mean? You can live anywhere you want if you're in the United States. You can go from New York to New Jersey, or where you came from. Where did you come from? Baltimore, anywhere. Here, you had to have permission to be in the city.
Right.
You had to have a reason why you were there. So the Bachrim, a dozen Bachrim, totally illegally in our city. But they took turns sleeping in different homes. There were quite a few Lubavitcher families there, mostly our family. And they took turns, and with great hope that they're not going to be arrested, and some of them were. So We had Farbrengens in the house. What I couldn't understand is why they were crying. And the Farbrengen, they were singing the Gunim, and wir soll sein mit der Rebbe, wir soll sein mit der Rebbe. And they were singing this very famous, I mean, they started singing in America. Die ganze Welt is a smaller brick. That's a song that they would sing, and they would just cry because they wanted to see the Rebbe. Now, we never saw the Rebbe. We never saw a picture. We had very few Sfarim of Chassidus, but the family lived mamish like a Chassidish family. So I have to say something about my mother. First of all, she's the one that taught us how to daven and stuff. But every single night when we went to sleep, my mother would put us to sleep with a story, and then with bracha, the Zayda soll sein gesund, the Zayda shall be well. And finally, it is the Rebbe says, I'll help him to zen mit the Rebbe, that Hashem should help us to see the Rebbe. Now, we had about as much chance to see a Rebbe, the Rebbe, as you going to Pluto, which isn't a planet anymore. So it was absolutely, and you're wondering, like, what was she thinking? And again, we never saw the Rebbe. We never expected to see the Rebbe. You couldn't even write a letter to the Rebbe. It was so dangerous. And if somebody wrote something to their family, they would say, "Gib a gerusum Zaydon," give regard to the Zayde, because you couldn't say Rebbe.
Right.
So that's what. So my father really, he was the manager of a factory, so it was easier for him to observe Shabbos. And he also tried to make sure that the Jewish workers shouldn't have any work. He would just tell them, I have nothing for you today, and that was it. But he was arrested quite a few times. And you would go to the police station with a sack full of money and bribe this one and that one, and he would go home. Baruch Hashem that he was ever really detained more than for a few hours. Finally, in 1946, the Russian government, Stalin, decided that he would allow the Polish immigrants who came to Russia get away from the war, that they allowed them to leave, go back to Poland. So this is where there was an opportunity for quite a few Lubavitchers to buy documents, false documents, obviously, that were Polish, and we were able to leave. But it was so dangerous. There were so many people that were caught with false papers and never to be seen again. So it was very dangerous. My mother and father had 5 children at the time. So we left, and the danger was at the border when the Polish police came onto the train to examine who's going there. Nobody spoke Polish. So you say, what do you mean? You're adult. The children don't speak Polish. They understand they were in Russia, but adults shouldn't speak. So it was so dangerous. There was just something very cute happened. That all of a sudden at the stop, that they stopped to be examined at the border. There was a family there from Poland. They were Polish, by the way. And all of a sudden we had a bunch of dolls, stuffed dolls, and lush quilts that came out of their luggage, and all got to play around with it, with the dolls and the quilts. We were having so much fun, the children. And as soon as we left the border, the people who gave us those dolls quickly retrieved them and put them away. They were full of diamonds, and that's how they got their money out of there. It was so, we found out like much later, but it was so much fun to play with those dolls and blankets, but it was full of, and that's how they got the money out. So that was beautiful.
How old were you at the time?
Pardon?
How old were you at the time?
When I left, I was 10 years old.
10 years old.
And then from, it took us, most people get on a plane and you come from Moscow or Georgia. It's a little more difficult. And they were in New York within whatever it is, 10 hours, 12 hours. Well, it took us 2 years to get to New York. Because first of all, we traveled with cattle cars everywhere. We stayed in different barracks. And it was, for kids, it was probably fun. It was, I mean, I don't remember it being unhappy. But for my parents, my mother especially, it was very, very difficult. And for my younger sister, she was a little child, so for her it was difficult. But me, I had two brothers, and a sister and two brothers, and my younger sister when we left. So for her it was difficult. But otherwise, for children, children make do with everything that happens. So for, for us, it was not difficult. Then we landed after after a year and many difficult travels with the cattle cars and such discomfort for my parents. We landed in Paris. And that was beautiful because at the same time, the Rebbe Tzachane came from Germany to Paris, and the Rebbe, who was not the Rebbe yet, came to Paris to get his mother. He was going to escort her to the United States. So my father served the Rebbe. He went on errands for the Rebbe. Whatever the Rebbe needed, he would send him. And my mother cooked for the Rebbe, and he would bring her, the Rebbe, the food. But I have to go back a little bit. My father, as they called him, was a dreamer. He always dreamed. He dreamt that my mother was going to have a boy. I mean, he dreamt all these kind of things. And then there was one year where my mother was expecting her fourth child. And no, third, yeah, fourth child. And my father has a dream that the Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe, in other words, he went to see him in 770. He's in 770. He's upstairs in a room, and he sees the Rebbe sitting in a wheelchair. And the Rebbe tells him, Mazel Tov, you're going to have a boy. And he's named after the Rebbe Rasham, Shalom Ber. And he should chazer a maimer, which is called Varay Kutaisi Lochem Bracha. I think I saw the story lately being spread around. That was a beautiful thing for my father, because I'll tell when you hear the end how it ends off. And wherever he went, he would ask people, "Did you ever hear such a maimer?" And when he described their dream, they said, "You were never in 770. You don't know what it looks like." And the Rebbe was a healthy person. He saw the Rebbe with a white beard. The Rebbe was reddish brown beard, and he was very healthy when he left Russia. So what kind of wheelchair? What do you dream? All you ever do with your dreams, they made fun of him a little. So wherever he asked, nobody heard of it. Then when he started to serve the Rebbe, finally he got courage to approach the Rebbe, and he asked the Rebbe, "Is there such a maimer?" So the Rebbe said, "Why are you asking?" So he told him about the dream. So the Rebbe made him repeat the dream. I think my father said 2 or 3 times in every detail. What the room looked like, what the Rebbe looked like, exactly what the Rebbe said, everything. And finally, the Rebbe went to his attaché case, and he took out a maimer, and he gave it to my father. And he said, "When did you have the dream? This is when the Rebbe actually said the maimer." That's why I thought was so fascinating. I was like, so with such detail.
This week's episode is brought to you by This World is a Garden, a new film and concert production by Yuvla Media. Based on the Rebbe's first talk, Basiligani, the production tells the story of the Chabad vision lasting over 300 years, to see this world as God sees it, as His garden. Combining beautiful cinematography with a live performance of a string quartet, This World is a Garden is a meditation on hope and holding on to a vision as time passes by. This production is now available to be shown at your Chabad house and community. Share the message and vision of Basiligani with your community in a way you never have before. For more information, please visit thisworldisagarden.com.
So that was my father. My father was a chassid, like when he came to America. He had a very difficult time because no language, no money. They spent all the money that they had to buy the documents. So on the way, they never had any money. And So the joint at that time was helping.
One second. Where did your father? You said you started with your father when they already lived in Georgia, but what was his background? You said he came from a Lubavitch family.
Yeah, he came from a Lubavitch
So,
family. His
right.
father, his grandfather, I think, became a Lubavitcher.
The large Lipsker
They lived
family.
in Poltava. It was a large family. Yeah.
I also come from that family.
All the Lipskers all over the world are the same family. So there's one in Morocco was Michal Lipsker. In Israel was Arya Label.
Right. No, my great grandmother was Menucha Lazarov. She was a Lipsker
Yeah,
also.
Menucha Lazar was a sister.
Was your aunt.
So she lived in Kutaisi with us.
Right, until she
got
married.
She was a widow at the time. She lost her husband when she was very young.
Oh, so she lived with you after she had lost her husband.
Yeah,
so with my grandmother.
Right.
My grandmother, Batsheva.
Yeah, she was right.
She grew up with you in Kutaisi.
She was in my father gave her work in the factory, so she was doing okay. But she was a widow, unfortunately.
Right.
With 3 little children.
Right. Yeah.
And that was part of the family. She was there. Label was there. Ari Leib, who eventually moved to Eretz Yisrael, and Michal Neimark was also another brother, and also Menken was another sister.
Where did your father get this deep connection from? Was he in
Was
he in Tenchetumim as a bacher? Was he in yeshiva? Was he in Tenchetumim as a bacher?
Yeah, of course. He learned. He was in Poltava.
He
learned. Yeah, he was. Of course, they learned. He and his brothers were brought up Lubavitch Chassidim, all of them. Mm-hmm. His grandfather, I think, became a Lubavitcher. So his father already was a Lubavitcher, and so were all the brothers and the sisters. You could see a picture of them. They're all, as a matter of fact, in Poltava, the women had sheitlach. So interesting. My mother didn't have one.
Where was Poltava?
I'm not familiar. I think maybe is it Ukraine? I don't know if it's Ukraine. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure.
Do you know what kind of community there was over there? Was it a community?
My father described the community very beautifully. He said on Shabbos, there were so many Jews in the streets, he said. It was just like you felt like you were in a Jewish neighborhood.
Was it a very Lubavitch town or just all kinds of...
No, it wasn't Lubavitch, but it was very frum.
No, were there a lot of Lubavitchers there?
I think they were the only family because Rabbi Teitz, I don't know if you know, he was also from Poltava. So Poltava had a Jewish community, a frum Jewish community.
Right.
But Lubavitch, I think, was only their family. Mm-hmm. But I'm not so familiar with the history in Poltava.
Right. So he had gone to Tenchetumim at some point, or he had gone to yeshiva in Lubavitch at some point, or he had.
I think I don't even know whether they traveled anywhere. I think they learned in Poltava. Okay. I don't think they went anywhere.
And he had,
except that eventually one of the brothers was in Gruzia, so he told them that it's good to come to, and they all, half of them came to Gruzia.
I'm just trying to understand where his connection to the Frierdiker Rebbe came from. Did he went to meet the Frierdiker Rebbe?
Don't forget one thing. Most people didn't see the Frierdiker Rebbe.
Right.
The Rebbe built up a system of an underground yeshivas all over the country.
Right.
So, as a matter of fact, my husband's father was one of the 9 people that the Frierdiker Rebbe called in, that they should swear that they're going to keep up Yiddishkeit in Russia to the last drop of blood. He was one of them.
Your father-in-law?
My father-in-law, Simon Jacobson Jacobson. Mm-hmm. Eventually, he changed it to Jacobson when he came to Canada, and then so they changed to Jacob. Their name was Jacobashvili.
Right.
So he was one of the 9 that, together with the Rebbe, there were 10 people that swore to keep up Yiddishkeit. So the yeshivas were all over. So Poltava had the same thing, an underground.
Oh, so your father grew up when everything was underground. That's when your father grew up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, everybody. That's the only way you got Yiddishkeit.
Okay.
It was completely forbidden. I mean.
Right. No, I knew that when you were growing up, it was like that. I didn't know that your father also was.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
But as a matter of fact, in Gruzia, it was easier.
Right.
In Poltava was more difficult. That's why they asked. The brother said, "Let's come to Gruzia." Right. Also, Moscow was impossible. Leningrad, all the big cities was impossible.
So your father, when he had that dream about the Frierdiker Rebbe, he had never met the Frierdiker Rebbe before?
No, of course not. He
Oh,
never
okay.
saw even a picture of the Frierdiker
He had
Rebbe.
never seen a picture even.
Never saw a picture,
Oh,
never saw
wow.
anything that resembled
Wow.
anything that.
Wow. No, I had understood that you hadn't seen because you were growing up in this. Even
Nobody.
he hadn't seen. Your mother
Very
hadn't
few
seen.
people saw
Right,
the
right,
Frierdiker Rebbe.
right.
They were brought up under the
Right.
Frierdiker Rebbe, but how many people saw him? Very few
And
people.
he had never seen a picture. Wow.
Never saw a picture of the Rebbe, nothing.
Wow.
And he described 770, the room upstairs. He
Wow.
described exactly what it looked
Wow.
like.
Wow.
And that the Rebbe was sitting in a wheelchair. It was amazing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It was really
Yeah.
an amazing story.
Yeah.
And the Rebbe made him repeat it
Yeah.
3 times because he said every single detail. The Rebbe wanted it every single detail.
Right.
And my father, he had a lot, very often he had dreams. So by him, dreams were a regular thing by him, you know.
Right.
But this dream was especially
Right.
profound and especially meaningful. And of course, he had a little boy, and to be told that you're going to have a boy was very helpful because you couldn't just run out to Empire Kosher
And get a moil.
buy stuff for the bris,
Right.
you know.
And to
He
find
had
a
to
moil.
make wine.
You had to find a moil, or was he a moil?
But I'm saying he made wine. He
Right.
prepared himself for the bris. You know, it was great to be told that you're going to have a boy. And
How would you describe your parents? Your parents at that time were they? I mean, I'm sure they shielded you from a lot as a child, but were they happy people? Were they
they were
sad?
very happy people.
Even in Kutaisi.
Yeah. They were. Especially my father was just a happy person in general. None of. I don't think any of his I don't think any of his brothers are like he is. First of all, the bitachon. He only lived with bitachon. There was no other way of thinking, and he always felt rich. Also, by him, there was no such a thing that we don't have money for something. Even when he came to America, and it was so not rich at all. I don't want to use the other word, negative word, but we never felt like, oh, you can't have this because we can't afford it. My father never spoke that way. He had such bitachon, and he had such, and the simcha of life. I mean, being a chassid by him, that was everything.
So he was a happy man
He was a very happy person.
all the way through.
All the way. Positivity was his life.
Wow.
Yeah. My mother had ups and downs.
Okay.
That's why there's a story about my mother in America that they went on Yechidas.
You said what was her name? Her maiden name?
Lepkivker.
Lepkivka.
It's funny, the whole family is Lipsker.
Lepkivka.
Her name was Lepkivker, and then I had another uncle, Lopkovsky.
Lepkowski.
It sounds like one name, you know.
Yeah.
So my mother was not a very happy person when she came to America because, first of all, she spoke English. This is so interesting. When my mother was about 17 years old, she was in school. Everybody was taking a language, French. She took English. She had no idea why. And this is over 100 years ago.
In Russia. In Russia.
In Russia.
Right.
Batum. They lived in Batum. And she took English. And when she came to America, she actually knew English.
Right.
Nobody else did. My father, of course, didn't, and none of us. Well, we learned very quickly. Kids, you know,
Right.
Immediately we learned English. And so she was a little bit low. So when they went on Yechidas, my father mentioned to the Rebbe that my mother is like, you know, not very happy. So the Rebbe told her she should dance at weddings. And that's what she did. She always danced. I mean, she was a dancer. She loved dancing. You know, in Russia,
Yeah.
she and her sisters made everybody happy at a wedding. They would dance nonstop. Her sister was also a singer, she had a beautiful voice. Baras, Chana Baras is her married name. So my mother started, and then you have no idea what it meant to some people that my mother was dancing. She would go to a wedding where the Russian families, Balchula families, where the people weren't comfortable, the family of the chassan or the kala. And my mother made them feel comfortable. She grabbed them. She would dance with the kala. She would dance with the mother. And it was just, she made people happy.
And did it make her happier as well?
Of course.
It
Of
did.
course. Of course. As a matter of fact, it's interesting. My brother, Yosef Yitzchak Fitzi, as they called him, was killed by a truck in an accident. Was very young. Fitzi.
From Morristown.
In Morristown, yeah.
That's your brother.
That's my brother. And so, after the year, she went to a wedding, and somebody said to her, how do you dance after such a tragedy? She said, it's a kunst to dance when you're happy. She said, you have to dance when you're not so happy also. People couldn't understand how she would just took herself under control, and no matter what, she would go to weddings and dance. But she never ate at any wedding. As a matter of fact, she wouldn't let me eat. She said, Tzivia, when the music plays, you dance. You'll eat at home.
Right, fair enough.
And that's what she did.
But did it help her at home as well?
Absolutely,
It did.
absolutely.
Yeah. It helps her become happier.
It helps also to be out there,
Right.
So
not to sink into depression.
Exactly. And nobody would know that she was depressed. As a matter of fact, my brothers always say, "What do you mean? Is it a true story?" Because they never saw her not happy. My mother would put kids to sleep and the grandchildren, always telling stories. Because she didn't stop reading. She read every single. There was any story, somebody would start saying, "Oh, I know that story." She knew all the stories. So nobody would even think that she was ever depressed in any way. My brother was also screaming at me. He said, "What do you mean? What do you say she was depressed?" Mother, never. And again, no money and really no new clothes for her. If there was any money, the clothes had to be for children, not for the mother. But you could never know it on her, never.
Right.
She never...
It's interesting because, it's not, it's quite a common story that immigrants have a hard time in their new country. But here they're leaving the Soviet Union and coming to America, the Golden Medina. You would think that it was all roses. And what you're saying is that it wasn't so simple for them.
It was not, because they didn't have any money.
Right.
You didn't have a language.
Right.
You didn't have any kind of qualifications to get a job.
Right.
So my father so this is very cute also. Cute. I don't know if the other word is cute, but my father, the government the joint was helping immigrants to settle in so they could have either a business or they become independent. So they offered that. So he went to the Friedrich Rebbe, was on Yechidas, and the Rebbe told him to get a newspaper.
Oh, so one second. So your parents came to America before the Friedrich Rebbe passed away?
Yeah, it came in 1948.
Okay.
Together with the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin about the same time, the Rebbe's mother and the Rebbe.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. So you asked the Friedrich Rebbe?
Came in 1948. So the Rebbe told him to buy a newspaper. He brought with the classified ads. He brought the newspaper to the Rebbe, the Chidas, and the Rebbe circled that there was a farm for sale. So we bought a farm. So they bought a farm. It was an egg farm. Not that he ever made any money. But he made Bala Tshuva. That's what he did in Hightstown. We were in Hightstown, New Jersey.
It's interesting. Rabbi Krinsky, I think, told me a story. I think his mother's family, also they had
farms. Yeah,
right. But the Rebbe Rashab had told them in Russia when they were going to America that they should buy a farm when they come to America.
Oh, that I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the early Rebbeim,
they were very much agriculture.
Building a farm. Yeah,
I think the Alter Rebbe also helped people to settle on with agriculture.
Yes, it started with the Baal Shem Tov already, which is really interesting. So your father was also a farmer at some point, an egg farmer.
I never call him a farmer, but
Well, an egg
He
farm
was-
means that you're dealing with chickens, and,
he was number one, he was a chassid. Number two, he was a chassid. Number three, he was a chassid.
I understand. He was
And
also
then he was also a farmer.
a Chassidish farmer.
And subsequently, he was also a grocer, but he was never a grocer. He never made any money.
Uh,
He sold the grocery to somebody who's making Baruch Hashem, I mean, very well. But my father didn't know how to make money.
well,
But he made chassidim.
what do you mean he had Balchuvas at the farm? What does that mean? Should I pour some seltzer?
Excuse me, no, it doesn't help me. There was a pharmacy that was owned by a family, a Jewish family with a few daughters. So he made them from, and the daughters married Lubavitch. One of them married a Mintz. The other one, I don't remember.
This is
They
in
had two
Hightstown, New
daughters.
Jersey.
This was in Hightstown, New Jersey,
That's
but the farm.
Where's that
And
near?
then-
Is that near Vineland? Is that
No, some people were in Vineland. We were in Hightstown.
is that near Vineland, the south of New
They're
Jersey?
not too far from each other.
south of
It's
New
also
Jersey.
New Jersey, but it's
Right.
not that far. Yeah.
Right, but it's in New Jersey that most people don't know about. It's the south of New Jersey.
Yeah, I know. It's not the place
not
that people
Lakewood.
know. Right.
It's not Lakewood.
exactly. Yeah. It's not a Jewish neighborhood.
Not anymore. It used to be
It was
more.
it was never Jewish.
Oh no, okay.
No. We were the only farmers there. Then it was Vineland had a few more people then, but we were the only ones in Hightstown.
Hmm. And how long were you there for?
A few years. I don't remember exactly how many.
And when you would live there, did you come into New York often?
What happened was we went to public school for 6 months, and something happened in the school that my mother said to my father, no more, because it was boys and girls, you know.
Right.
Shkotzim and the Jews, Lahavdil. The Jews didn't want to be known as Jews. They were really
Right.
they didn't look that Jewish, you know, and they wouldn't even admit that they're Jewish. Most of the kids, because it was.
So what was that like for you? You were obviously Jewish.
Yeah, it was very difficult for us. My sister and I went to public school. Nobody else. Esther and I.
In Russia, you hadn't gone to public school, right? You didn't go to
No, we had teacher at home. No,
So this
we
was a
didn't go
fir-
to school.
this
We
was a
never
f-
registered.
Right.
If we had registered, then they would look for us.
Right.
But we never registered, so we were sort of like under the radar.
But I'm saying this was the first time that you had been intermingled with other kids,
Yes.
and it was
No, we had plenty of friends
But in school?
Georgia.
in school. I mean,
Oh, yeah, in school was the only first time then, in the public school. And then something happened, which I don't know if I should repeat it. So
I think
my
everybody-
mother was
I
not
think
very happy.
I think everybody figured it out already.
My mother was not happy, so they had a midnight discussion. I called it midnight, you know, when the kids are asleep. And they decide they're going to send the girls to school in Crown Heights.
Beis
So
Rivka-
this- yeah,
was it
so
Beis
we-
Rivka already?
There was no Beis Rivka, there was Beis Yaakov.
Beis
So we
Yaakov.
went to Williamsburg.
Right. And where did you stay? By your cousins?
And we stayed in rooms, you know, we rented rooms, and it was not a happy time.
Not a happy time.
But, you know, kids were always happy anyway.
What was it like for your father? Do you remember what it was like for your father and mother to meet the Frierdiker Rebbe the first time? After all those years of...
Also, when we came,
Yeah.
when we came to America, at about a month after we came, we had Yechidus with the Rebbe. So it was my mother and father, and there were 6 children now,
Oh, 6.
because I had a brother was born in France, in Paris.
What's his name?
So it was Tzivia Hirsch, and he married a Frenchie. It's interesting. So when we came into Yechidus, we all said Shehechayanu with Shema Malchus, you know, you see the Rebbe for the first time. And then the Rebbe told us, to see such a family coming out of Russia, I have to say Shehechayanu, the Rebbe said.
Really?
Yeah, it was so beautiful. Now,
Wow.
I know kids certainly didn't understand what the Rebbe was saying, because he had a speech impediment because of his not being well, obviously. But the secretary told us what the Rebbe said, and then he gave us such brachas. I always tell people, they say, well, why do you deserve to have such children and grandchildren? And great grandchildren. I said, it's all the Rebbe's brachas. First we had brachas from the Frierdiker Rebbe, and then we had brachas from the Rebbe, you know. So it's all due to all these brachas that we got.
And what do you remember what it was like for your parents to?
It was so thrilling. I mean, I know they couldn't stop. First of all, my father was also, and later when we were still on the farm, the Rebbe was nostalgic, Yud Shvat. So they called Motzei Shabbat, they called him, and he came in and he was part of the Chevra Kadisha that took care of the Rebbe. So when he came back to the farm, he described what the Rebbe looked like. We were all crying. He described everything to us. It was, for him, was, you know, it was such an experience. And so a chassid is a chassid, you know, he's such a... And when the Rebbe, and right after the Histalkos, my father, I mean, couldn't even think of anything but the Rebbe is the Rebbe. There was no, you know,
Really?
not a doubt in his mind. Yeah, of course.
Well, from
He
their
told us, you
from
know,
their
that's the Rebbe.
from their encounter in Paris.
When, I don't know if it's an encounter. My father didn't need, I don't think, the encounter in Paris.
No, because there were some people who were. There was the Rashag as well. Your father. Your father knew.
My father knew.
Mm-hmm.
There was no doubt in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. That's why, you know, my brothers and sisters, they were all such chassidim because the Rebbe, my father infused in us this chassidishkeit, and my mother from home, from Georgia, from Gruzia, we were infused with chassidishkeit of the Rebbeim. We never saw a Rebbe. We never saw anything about, not one single picture of any Rebbe.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that we were chassidim of the Rebbe, there was no question about it. You know, this is how you live. That's how a chassid lives.
Right. So you spoke about your parents' challenge of adjusting to the United States, which makes a lot of sense. How was it for you as a younger person? Was it hard? Do you remember that adjustment?
Yeah, I'll tell you. When I went to Beit Yaakov, first of all, the kids were very nice to us. You know, nobody really looked down at us or anything. So I think we were treated very fairly. The principal spoke to my father. She saw that he didn't have any money. She didn't take any money from us. But we weren't treated like people who were not paying. So always treated nicely. And I had right away friends. I learned English so quickly. You see, I have no accent. Am I right? I have a Brooklyn accent,
Yes.
but not a Russian. And I speak Russian fluently.
You do to this day.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
To this day.
So, but I don't have a Russian accent. I learned immediately.
Right.
And first of all, in public school was very good because nobody spoke any other language.
Right. No Yiddish.
In Beit Yaakov, I could speak Yiddish. Many people spoke Yiddish, obviously. But in public school, I didn't. So I think that helped me a lot.
Right.
So when it came to Beit Yaakov, I was already English. I knew already, but not that well. But I adjusted, I think, not badly. I don't think I wasn't unhappy.
Right.
I was never unhappy.
Right. But did you realize the magnitude of the change of the country that you lived in? Like in Russia, everything's very hidden and very secretive.
You know what? Again, even in Russia, you see, our parents had such a warm home that we never felt this alienation or anything. We never felt like we don't belong somewhere, because I think in other parts of the country, definitely people felt that way. We knew my father was in danger. We knew the Bachrim were in danger, but we didn't feel it in our home. So in our home was very warm. My father baked matzah in our house. So that night we couldn't go to sleep because the beds were all covered up with white sheets and the matzahs were cooling off. Until they finished baking the matzah, we couldn't go to sleep.
Wow.
All the beds and the tables, any place that was possible, they put sheets and the matzahs were being baked in our house. So again, the atmosphere was always so chassidish, so warm, so with Yiddishkeit, that we never felt like aliens anywhere.
So
When we
it
came
was,
to America, it was just easier. You understand? It was easy. We didn't have to worry about anything. And what I find fascinating about my family and about some of the people that we're close with is they didn't change in the sense that now we don't have to fight for anything. Everything is so easy. I'm a chaya, you know. All you have to do is get a business, make money, and you'll be good. My father never went into this mode of there you have to fight for Shemitah Shabbos, for lighting candles, for everything, for kashrus. We never tasted a piece of meat because we only had a shochet for chickens
in Kutaisi.
in Russia ever. So the first time I had tasted meat was like in New York, because even on the farm we couldn't afford the meat. We had chicken farm, so we ate chicken.
And what was your verdict? Was it overrated or underrated?
Overrated.
Overrated.
Yeah. You can make something delicious with chicken and with vegetables.
Fair enough.
One thing about my mother, she was a great cook. She could make something out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yesh ma'ayin was my mother's way. So we had never had any problems with that. And again, so the adjustment, I think my father, forget about it. My father came here and he was the same chassid and the same not caring about money, not caring about anything except really living. I'm a chaya now. He doesn't have to worry that he's going to get called by the police, the next day.
Right.
Didn't have to worry about that. So that was by him, like just the burden was taken off. But the different kind of a life, totally not.
Mm.
Because some people, I watched them change, and it was so painful.
Mm.
And that's what the Rebbe, I'm sure, I don't know how much you know about when the Rebbe took over, that was his challenge. He had to bring Mesiras Nefesh to the Jews that came, that were the Chabad that was here.
So
Because the Mesiras Nefesh was not there.
So describe that a little bit. I think that's a very important subject.
Because, it reminds me, my husband will talk about, I don't know if we have time to talk about the Algemeiner, but
Of course, we'll
my
get
husband was he was 17, 18. He was in Paris. He was a writer. He loved writing. He was a really talented writer. So he wrote in a newspaper already in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And his dream was writing.
Mm-hmm.
So he came to America by the Shiva when my husband passed away. So his friends were here. So his friends told us something very beautiful, which I never heard before. He said that we all hang around, say, what are we going to do in America? Some of them were married. My husband was the youngest. He was still a bacher. And they all said, well, we're going to build a business. So some of them became, they owned knitting factories, because it was something, you didn't need skill, you didn't need any kind of literary skills,
Right.
you just, and he said, I want to change the world. That's what he said. It was so beautiful because he wanted to be a journalist, and that's it. So the first years of our marriage, we also struggled financially because a guy with a beard at Lubavitch wants to be a journalist. You understand? The journalistic world was not amenable to chassidim, to frumkeit. And he had a lot of challenges, and the money was he wanted to be a journalist, so that's what he wanted to be, a dream. And he became a journalist, and they made inroads. I mean, when he revolutionized journalism and the Jewish world.
Right.
With the Algemeiner.
But he didn't start.
Even before, he was working for the Day Jewish Journal. Even there, he brought in things that nobody did.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was his own, he was still a chassid of the Rebbe.
Mm-hmm.
So he brought in things that...
No, let's get to that. But first describe a little bit what you're talking about, because it's a very interesting topic. Describe a little bit this challenge that you said that the Rebbe had with his own Lubavitch community in Crown Heights, right?
The challenge was, I remember there was the first story that we heard, through the grapevine. That there was a couple that had just gotten married, mm-hmm. and that somebody, I guess, wanted a shluchim. So the Rebbe suggested that this couple should go there. So he gets a call from a woman. Through the secretary, that this woman must have yichidus. She can't take it. She has to have yichidus. And those days you could have yichidus pretty, easily. So she came in and she's crying, my only daughter, and you're sending her so far away. I can't take it. So the Rebbe told her, I thought you were interested in the welfare of your children, but I see that you're interested in your own welfare, so I'm not sending them. And they didn't go. And that was the attitude. It's comfortable. We had enough suffering, enough fighting for Yiddishkeit. Machai, you can do whatever you want here. What's the problem?
Right.
Then, especially, what happened when, so the Rebbe had to fight his own people.
But you were also
But the Friedrich Rebbe said, America is not anders.
Right.
He set the scene for it. But the Rebbe had to fight for every single step of bringing Mesiras Nefesh. And of course, in America, you didn't need Mesiras Nefesh of your body. You need Mesiras Haratzin.
Right.
It's also Mesiras Nefesh.
Right.
But that's more difficult, by the way. God, that when somebody wants to force you to do something, the nature of a human being is to fight. If nobody's forcing you, what are you fighting for? You can have whatever you want. What do you have? You can have the cake and eat it too.
Right.
You don't need to fight for anything.
Right.
But the Rebbe spirit, the Rebbe, you fight for everything. If you're not fighting, then you're not living.
Right. But the story that you just mentioned is about shlichus, which is that the Rebbe had to basically encourage and push.
Exactly.
But you earlier it sounded like you were talking more about within the community.
Exactly. Within the community also.
Things were slipping.
Yeah, because you know what? They came from all over. Like we had a pretty, materially, we didn't have a difficult life in Georgia.
Right.
But in Moscow and Leningrad, wherever the Jews were, they suffered both financially and physically.
Right.
We didn't have that. So when people came here, like this friend of my husband said, I want to have a business, quiet, buy myself a little house, I'll be comfortable. That's what we want. And enough struggling. Do we have to keep struggling? Why do we come to America? America, the golden Medina, you can be frum and you can have everything. What's the problem? What are you fighting for? The Rebbe was fighting. The Rebbe was. I'm sure you heard the first sikha. The Rebbe said,
Right.
you have to work. You need to work. I will help you. But the work has to be done by which work? Which work? Work. You have a country that's hungry for Yiddishkeit. How are you going to motivate people? Every sikha. What was the sikha all about at the beginning? Every sikha was talking about that. He had to fight his own people. And I could see it. And the people that were with us in Georgia even became a butcher. He was a butcher. That's what he was. In Russia, he was a chassid. Here, he became a butcher. You understand? Because nobody's fighting you.
Right.
Nobody's demanding anything from you. What's the problem? We're frum. You can be as frum as you want. Whatever hidurim, all the hidurim that you want. Chalav Yisrael and everything. Do you remember when the Rebbe spoke about after Kennedy came out with his, that he was sending out people.
The Peace Corps.
He said, there's a guy.
Right.
And the people are going for it. They don't know where they're going. They're not promised any money. They're not promised any food. Nothing. You're going out in the boondocks. You're going to a desert to help people. So he said, when the guy said it, people were jumping.
Yeah, I mean, like when you look at pictures from back then, like you see weddings where you see plenty of men sitting next to the Rebbe without beards.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've seen pictures, but I know that many of the weddings were mixed seating.
No, not mixed.
Not dancing, but seating. There was mixed, I think. No.
No, there was no mixed. Very few.
Very few.
No, I don't think it wasn't that. It
No,
was more, again,
standards were certainly in certain ways more relaxed then than they are today.
yeah, they were relaxed.
Right.
I'll tell you one
What
thing
was it?
that's very interesting, and I think we have to understand that without being critical of Chabad. In Russia, the clothes didn't mean anything. You understand?
Interesting.
It didn't tell you how frum somebody was. As a matter of fact, the guy could look like a bigger peasant and was frummer than the guy that had a beard.
Mm-hmm.
So clothes meant nothing.
Why? Because of communism, or in general?
Because of communism.
Okay.
Because you couldn't dress like a what? They walk around with capotas, yeah.
How do you mean? Okay.
So clothes meant nothing. That's why even in America, when Berkechein and all these guys were wearing kasketkas, why weren't they wearing black hats?
Right.
They knew that the clothes mean nothing.
Interesting.
You understand? Some women who didn't cover their hair because they couldn't were frimmer than the one that covered their hair in America. You understand? Taras HaMishpacha by them was like they went to frozen lakes to go Taras HaMishpacha.
Right.
But they didn't cover their hair. So somebody said, oh, that one, oh. You understand? So this was
Very
brought
interesting.
to New York. So
No, 'cause
here,
I
clothes did not mean anything. We didn't have to dress a certain way to be frum. So that's why you see in pictures, people are not dressed. As a matter of fact, my husband did not wear a kapota for many, many years until his daughter got married. And
why not?
He was a journalist, okay?
Right.
You know, and he didn't take it upon himself.
Right.
But my daughter's friends were saying, your father doesn't wear a kapota, you know, like that.
No, it's interesting. I was always convinced because of that your husband didn't come from a Lubavitch family, and then you tell me now. No,
his father gave us.
That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
That's how far the image.
So he came to 770 to Fabring with his crazy hat.
Your husband.
Because he was coming straight from work.
Your husband.
Yeah.
With a different colored hat.
He came from work,
Like
from his business.
His white hat.
Yeah,
I've seen the white hat you're talking about. Yeah,
and the jacket could be,
white, white or whatever.
Beige.
Right.
Come to Fabring. This is a chassid. You understand? Clothes.
Right.
So we have to understand.
So he wasn't trying to he wasn't trying to make a point that he doesn't care. It was
totally not.
It's irrelevant.
He worked for Yediot Achronot.
Right. He had to fit in.
An Israeli newspaper. So he worked at 12 o'clock at night. He had to be at the office to send news because there was 6 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So, and the Fabrenga would start 9:30. So he would come at about 1:30 to Fabrenga. So he dressed the way he was dressed in the office, in his newspaper.
Right.
He would come straight to, he didn't come home to change.
Right.
He went straight to Fabrengen. First of all, it was very interesting. As soon as he would come into Fabrengen, the next sikha had to do with something, whether it's Israel or something that only he picked up the nuances.
Rebbe was talking to him.
Yeah, because people later on said, when did the Rebbe say this? Because he was right, about it. Well, the Rebbe said it.
When you went into, I'm sure you went into Yechidus with your husband, just the two of you.
What did it?
I'm sure you went into Yechidus with your husband.
Yes, I did.
Right. Did he change his clothing then?
Yeah, of course. He went for Yechidus.
Right.
Usually we went like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning.
No, but he didn't wear a kapata, right? He still didn't wear a kapata.
Later on, when he started wearing kapata, he wore a kapata.
No, but I'm saying at that he didn't feel like he had to put on airs.
Absolutely not. The Rebbe knew him very well.
And the Rebbe never said anything to him, obviously, about that. Right.
It's interesting because in one of the Yechidus, after he opened up the newspaper, the Algemeiner, the Rebbe was involved with the name. I mean, really very fascinating story altogether. But my husband Gershon asked the Rebbe, some people say that the paper is not frum enough. So what do you think the Rebbe said to him? He said, I'm sure that some people say it's too frum.
That's what the Rebbe said to him.
Exactly. The Rebbe knew what a newspaper was.
Right.
And he knew that to get people, to get a sikha into their house, they're going to have a newspaper that has what they need. And then they're going to have a Rebbe sikha in the house. They're going to have all about malkas and weddings and bar mitzvahs and Jewish things. Because the Jewish newspaper were very secular. So when he opened up his newspaper, there wasn't one single issue they didn't have a sikha.
Right.
And they also had theater and books and articles that were totally anti-Zionist, anti-Jewish, anti-everything. Because he wanted to attract the people. Who's buying a newspaper? The Rebbe even said it. He said, a person who never has a sefer in his house now has a sikha in his house.
Right. Was that the motivation?
That was the goal.
That was the goal of opening the newspaper, was to spread Yiddishkeit?
Opening the newspaper was to give Jews a glimpse of life that wasn't biased in any way. Mm-hmm. You understand? First of all, he gave opportunity to Koifrim to write.
Just to give a little bit of background, because a lot of that has to do with the fact that most of the Yiddishists in newspapers before that were very, very left, right?
Not all of them. There was one paper that he was working for was middle, was not left at all.
But most of them were
Yeah, completely.
Right, so that's what you mean by unbiased, to give them something without all of that, right?
But he also gave an opportunity. As a matter of fact, when Natanya Lidmor, who was, he changed his mind before he died. But he used to write against Israel. He was such an Arabist, and he came to get kosher bracha with my husband to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe told him that he's a great writer. He reads his stuff. He said, "Do you agree with me?" He said that he asked the Rebbe, and said, "I don't have to read only what I agree with."
That's what I said to this columnist.
He was such an anti, and the Rebbe said he reads it.
Right.
Do you understand?
So the Rebbe would regularly read the Algemeiner Journal?
Cover to cover.
Cover to cover.
The Rebbetzin told me.
Rebbetzin told you that?
I spoke to her on the phone because I wanted something from her. So she said, "My husband and I."
She said it in what, in English?
No, it's Yiddish.
My husband and
Mein Mann.
How do you say that in Yiddish?
Mein Mann.
Und mir?
Und ich.
Und ich,
mein Mann.
Ich, mein Mann.
Lehnen die Zeitung.
Really?
Das ist eine gute Zeitung, sehr, sehr interessant. Ja, der Mann ist ein sehr talentierter Mensch. Because I asked him, my husband was coming out with an issue for Yud-Beis Tammuz. So my husband said to me, call the Rebbetzin and see if you can get something from her. A picture, a story, anything that's a little bit unusual.
You worked with your husband or just this one time?
No, I worked with
You were part of the Algemeiner
I was
Journal?
the fire under the Algemeiner when it started.
So you were involved the whole time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Later, they didn't need me.
Okay.
But at the beginning, I was the fire. Because we had nothing else. We didn't have money. We didn't have a place.
But you bought into the
Somebody
vision.
gave us a room in a factory. Mendel Shem Tov gave us a room in the factory, in his factory. They gave me a little closet. They gave me a room inside with their secretaries. And every time I would get on the phone, I try to get ads. Now you had to be really enthusiastic, excited, and say things and they're all listening in. I said, okay, I need a closet where I can talk freely the way I want to. Mm-hmm. And I can get the ads, because the paper needed advertising. We had no money.
Right.
And also, all the writers, they had such great writers. I'm telling you, that's what I regret. Like, we don't have one. Okay, America doesn't have it anymore either. Even the New York Times used to have great writers. They don't have them anymore. But our writers, the Yiddish writers, and I love Yiddish. It's my first language. I just love Yiddish. They were so talented. They were brilliant. Mm-hmm. And they had no place to be. They were writing in their own home, and they would bring the article to my husband. So I had to give them inspiration. So I would call them up and I'd tell them, I read your, and I did. I read all their, it's not that I never made up anything, because I love reading. And I would tell them, it's so exciting to read what you wrote, because they had no feedback. They had no place to gather and talk about it. Each one was in his own house. You understand? So I had to get them. So I would call a whole day. I was on the phone, either getting advertising or speaking to the writers. So I was the fire under that paper. But after that, they didn't need me. They had salesmen, they had writers, they had everything that they needed. But I'm a very good editor. And when even my husband, who wrote brilliantly, I used to edit his editorial. Every week he would write his own editorial. I would tighten it up, and he loved it because I didn't let him repeat anything. I was so meticulous about it, and it worked very well.
Beautiful. Did the Rebbe give you?
I'm looking now for a job to edit Yiddish or Hebrew.
Yiddish or Hebrew.
Yeah.
Did the Rebbe give you something in the end?
No, that's a lesson in never saying no and not giving anything.
She didn't say no.
She never said the word no.
But she didn't give anything.
No. I always talk about it. I said, I kept saying, "Oh, but Rebbe, Efsher. Is sehr talentiert." Every time she just kept throwing compliments. I read every word he says. I'm sure he's going to come out with the best used supplement that ever was. And he did. It was beautiful.
What was your relationship with Rebbitzin that you had this kind of conversation?
Oh, it started out with our cousins who came from Russia in 1972. That was the second big exodus from Russia to America and to Israel. Right. So my husband's family was all in Russia. He never had anybody in America. When we got married, he had a second cousin twice removed to be his Unterführer.
His parents had passed away, or they were stuck in Russia?
His parents had passed away before I met him.
Mm-hmm.
And so his family came in 1972. They went to Israel, but they came for Pesach to the Rebbe.
How did his father pass away? By the communists or just?
No, they came in, I don't know what year it was, they came to Canada. My husband, mother, and father, and they had one little boy, and they had 3 sons.
They made it out.
Yeah, my husband and Bezalel was the second one, and the little one, he was born in Germany after the war already. Mm-hmm. He was 5 years old, and his father passed away. My father was very, very sick from being tortured. He was arrested and tortured. At the time when he was when there was a shliach from the Rebbe.
Yeah. So
he was tortured. He was in Siberia. What they didn't do to him, they broke his Kutaisi, what do you call the spine? And he was so sick.
He was paralyzed.
No. They broke it so he was like bent over. He was a very tall person. And then he died in Canada. And a year later, even less than a year, his wife died. Mm. So both of them died before I ever met him. Right. The boy was 5 years old.
The younger brother.
Yeah, and subsequently my parents took him into their house, which is another story.
Before you were married?
Before I was married, yeah.
That's how you met, I assume.
Well, I met him before that, but not seriously, and this time was more serious. He used to come every day to see his brother.
That's how you met?
That was very convenient.
That's how you met. Very nice.
No, official, originally he was in...
You threw a shotgun in there to make it official, but...
No, it was... Originally, we met before that, but not officially, just... I was in the same house where he was eating, stuff like that. But then when he started to come every single day to see his brother, it was very convenient. We didn't need a shotgun.
You didn't even need a shotgun. Very nice.
Yeah. So, with the Rebbitzin. So the family...
And he was already a journalist at that time? Or he was just still a Bacher in Yeshiva? Or once he came to Canada and America was already
he was a Bacher in Yeshiva.
Yeah. Here in 770?
In 770, yeah.
Only afterwards he became a journalist?
Yeah, after we got married. He was still a shliach. He traveled for Merkaz.
Oh, yeah.
For a year, yeah. And then he just couldn't. He just needed to go back to... He had to go to his... vocation. To him, writing was his life.
Mm-hmm. And the Rebbe was very supportive of it, was he not?
Yeah, very supportive.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get back. Oh, you were saying so that's how you're...
My connection to the Rebbe. Yes. I just want to give it briefly.
Yes.
So the cousins came here for Pesach. They stayed with us.
Your husband's cousins.
My husband's cousins. Yeah.
Right.
So the 2 women wanted to see the Rebbetzin. So I called my father. My father used to call the Rebbetzin every single day to see how she is, every morning.
Your father.
My father. As a matter of fact, my father built the Aron Kodesh in 770, right?
Yes.
So the Rebbetzin, he consulted the Rebbetzin, and she gave him ideas about how to.
Wait, so what was your father's Yachas to the Rebbetzin? From that time of your cousins or from already before?
No, my father was very close to the Rebbetzin for years already.
The Rebbetzin Chana or
Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka. Yeah.
Back from Russia?
No.
From here?
Never, yeah.
From here. So
he never saw her in Russia.
Right. So you would call her every day.
Every day we just talked for a few minutes, sometimes a little longer.
Just to see how she's doing.
Just to say hi.
What was the motivation?
I don't know. Just like this.
Just like this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she respected him tremendously. You'll hear from the way she responded. Anyway, so I called my father and I said, my cousins want to see the Rebbetzin. Could you give me the Rebbetz's number? And what do you think he said?
No. He hadn't learned.
No.
He hadn't learned. He
so
knew,
what do I do? My father says no.
He knew how to say no.
It's no.
Right.
He said it very clearly. He wasn't hinting.
Right.
So I bought a dozen roses, and I wrote a Yiddish letter on my beautiful stationery, and I sent my daughter to the Rebbetzins' house with a note saying that their two cousins came from Russia, they're here for Pesach, and they would love to meet the Rebbetzin. If it's possible, here's my telephone number. And she delivered it, and she came home. A half an hour later, the phone rings, and it's the Rebbetzin. And she said...
How did she introduce herself?
She said Mrs. Schneerson. She called herself.
This is Mrs. Schneerson.
So she said to me, why did you send me flowers? So I told her the story about my father. She says, Klugerid is a smart man. Her own daughter. You're not going to give, your favorite daughter. I'm not the favorite. I'm the oldest. So that's how I started with the Rebbetzin. She called me. Finally, I had her number, and they met for 2 hours, over 2 hours.
Your cousins?
With the Rebbetzin. I was also there, but I didn't open my mouth. She spoke to them in Russian. She just loved. First of all, the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin love Russian Jews. I mean, like with a passion.
Right.
They love everybody, but Russian Jews is a passion.
Right.
So she spoke to us. She asked them all the detail because these two women were some of the girls that were really revolutionary. They marched in the street and they were thrown out of their jobs, and they really were very active there. So she wanted to know all the details. It was so beautiful. That was my first contact with the Rebbe. And after that, I spoke to her, a few times.
Hmm. So you were saying earlier about which is a very interesting thing to me, this idea that clothing back in Russia didn't mean anything, because I actually had seen a picture recently of a Lubavitch family, a quite well-known Lubavitch family, and you see like the husband is with a long beard and a casquette and a long coat, and his wife, it's pretty apparent, I don't know for sure, but 95% sure that she's not covering her hair, right? And like you said, like you see that, you think you can understand the person, but she probably was going to mikveh in ice water, which is very interesting.
Exactly.
Right. And
that's why I say people have to understand. Right. If you don't know the Russian Jews,
right, then
you don't understand this, because especially by the other Chassidim, clothes are everything.
Right. So you said that translated here, and in the early years, people didn't, but it has changed, right? It has changed over time.
Of course.
Right.
There's no question. Why wouldn't there somebody cover? First of all, the Rebbe would not give Besader Kedushin unless the woman said she would wear sheitel and the Bachar had a beard. Right. So that was a motivation for many people.
Right.
And then finally he came out very strongly about only wearing a sheitel, not wearing a tichel or a hat, and only wearing a sheitel. The Rebbe revolutionized us. He revolutionized us. I was listening to a sikha even about having children. I was listening to a Sikha of Menachem, Achav Menachem Ov, how the Rebbe speaks about having children. He had to do that.
Right. You're saying more children having.
And then that year, everybody was having babies. All of a sudden, everybody's having babies. What happened before that?
Right.
That was the second time that the Rebbe did that. The years before he did that, and then in Menachem Ov, I think, what year was it? 52, I don't remember what year it was, 84 maybe? I don't remember. Again, he spoke so strongly about how brachas come with every child, and you can't make any cheshbonos. I mean, it's such a strong sikha. So, and not once. He said it a few times in the same Farbrengen. The Rebbe had to, he fought for every step.
No, it's interesting though, because the thing almost flips, because in Russia you could see a person and you didn't know what the way they were dressed, and now it's people could conform to a certain standard, and you again don't know where they are, because it can go too far in the other direction. Exactly. Also
even in our own community,
right,
you'll see things that a guy who touches his beard could be more frum than a guy who doesn't touch his beard at all.
Right.
You can't tell anymore.
Right.
You can't tell anymore. And that's not how we judge. We can't judge by the way.
Right.
Originally, I would say that Russian Jews were so frum, and you couldn't tell by the way they dressed, obviously, or the women even covering their hair. I remember my aunt came, and she was wearing a hat, and people were just like making fun of her. She was so frum. I can't tell you how frum she was.
And they didn't wear sheitel because it was pushed too dangerous, or it was...
Here, I'm saying she was good. She came to America.
But from back
there, of course not.
Too dangerous.
Yeah. You could, first of all, you couldn't get a sheitel.
Right, it didn't exist.
I mean, the sheitel is amachai. Nobody knows what you're wearing.
Right.
I mean, how many times people don't even know that I'm wearing a sheitel? I mean, among ourselves, we know.
Right.
But when I speak for secular women, I have to tell them I'm wearing a sheitel.
Right.
Because it doesn't look, you can't tell.
Right.
So, but they couldn't get sheitlach.
Right.
They had to wear a tichel or a hat.
Right.
Why are you wearing a hat in the middle of the summer? Can you explain that to me, please? It was impossible. It was very dangerous. Right. Because the neighbors would say, oh, that one, yeah, she always covers her hair. Neighbors told on each other. Children told on their parents. Right. Do you understand the danger? It was lurking. The danger was lurking everywhere. You just couldn't, and that was it. Right. Your husband would be thrown out of his job. That's what,
Yeah.
What do you do then? I mean, not only, that wasn't the worst thing. He was thrown to Siberia, never to be seen again.
Right.
So that's why clothes, again, in those days, clothes didn't mean anything. Now, what? We're very challenged. Galus is zeir bitter. Galus is bitter. It just, when the Rebbe says, Chayshach kafel chuppal, when the Rebbe was Farbrengen, I couldn't understand what it meant. I felt like we were in heaven. When the Rebbe was Farbrengen, you were in Gan Eden. You were not in this world. I don't know, how old are you?
No, I wasn't there.
So I'm saying, by Farbrengen, you just felt like you were in heaven.
Right.
And the Rebbe says, like where? What are you talking about? Now it's very easy to see that. And you can't blame anybody. You can't judge or blame anybody. But life is very difficult right now. And Mashiach better come. That's all I can say.
You used to go to Farbrengens often?
All the time.
All the time.
When my kids were already at the age that I could go.
Right. What was it? What was it like for women to go to Farbrengen? Was it common, or is it just a matter of?
It was packed.
It was packed upstairs, and you're able to hear upstairs.
It's interesting that most women didn't hear and didn't understand.
You couldn't hear, right? You're far away, and then if you could hear,
I could hear because I wanted to, and I concentrated.
You sat at the front.
I had a place right across from the Rebbe.
Oh, the women also had set places. Like the men.
Well, I had, because what I would do. People remind me now, I'm in 7-7, and this young woman comes over to me. Yeah, I used to sit near you when what I did was this. I would by Fabrengen, first of all, you have the window. I don't know if you went to the women's. Do you know the women's section?
Not very well, but I've seen.
Okay, it's
I've
glass.
Seen. Yes.
But there's an opening like this much.
Right underneath the glass. Right.
Underneath the glass.
Right.
So my chin was like this, I'd be across from the Rebbe so I could see his lips, and I could hear most of the Fabrengen.
1 second. That's the later years. In the earlier years, it was upstairs, right? Or was there a place for women up there too?
In the early years, it was impossible. We had a window that we could stand by. We couldn't hear anything.
You couldn't hear anything. So this was already an upgrade. When it was downstairs. And so you would sit listening through the opening.
So whatever I understood, I would right away, when they were singing, I would turn around and tell the woman what the Rebbe said.
So you're the first Chayzer in the Jacobson family, before your sons.
No,
Is that what you're saying?
they were before me. They taught me how to do this.
But what do you mean? This is when they were little kids.
When they were little, I couldn't go to Fabrengen.
Oh, so you were going when they were already older.
When they were all older.
So the whole Jacobson family was Chayzer together.
So what happened was this: every Fabrengen, I would be by the Fabrengen. I would come home, and my kids would come, and they say, I said, I don't know. I think I understood what the Rebbe was saying. I don't remember one single thing. How is that possible? So my son Simon especially told me, when the Rebbe speaks, you can't be thinking.
Right. He told me
You're
that too.
either listening or you're processing. You can't do both.
Right.
So if you're going to concentrate on emptying your mind, not to think even something like, oh, this is so interesting, you lose a few words of the Rebbe. Or, oh, I heard this before. You lost it.
Mm.
So if you concentrate on not letting your mind go anywhere, oh, I forgot to shut the cholent. Whatever it is,
All right.
Then you will be able to retain it.
Mm.
I started practicing, and within a few months, I had it.
It's funny because Simon spoke about it on the podcast also when I had him on. He was also talking about that. So who was the best Chayzer once you figured it out? You or Simon?
Please. Also, they had the advantage of being worse.
Right.
The Rebbe said certain things I didn't get it.
No,
I couldn't understand a
No,
Maimed.
I'm just joking, obviously.
I know.
But it is interesting to me because I don't think I've ever really spoken to or heard from a woman what it was like to come to Fabrengen. Especially when you look at the videos, all you see is the men there. You don't see the women out there.
You never see the women all together.
No. Was that something hard for you? Was that like no, you're too old school to.
You know what? We never had the problem that the secular world has, that the women are being, second-class citizens.
Right.
When I was younger, used to get invited to all kinds of secular women's groups to speak to them. The first thing they said, women can have an aliyah and this and that. I mean, I learned from the Rebbe Sichas how to answer these questions. Mm. But I said to them, I never had that question. So sometimes I couldn't answer what they were asking me, and I said, I have to look that up because to me, it never bothered me that I wasn't part of a minyan. But then the Rebbe himself spoke about why the men have a minyan because of the meraglim. The women had nothing to do with the meraglim. Right. So, or the cheta ekel. I mean, I learned all this sichot about women's issues. I had no problem answering anybody's questions.
No, I don't mean it so much like the feminism kind of thing. And more just this sense of being like you're distanced. You're coming to Fabrengen to listen to what the Rebbe said. You said you can barely hear what he's saying.
How many men? You want to know something?
Yeah.
How many men really, really listen? You tell me.
Not as many as people think.
Okay, exactly. You had a few thousand people.
Right.
And they're all going, and sometimes sleeping, and sometimes the women had the same problem. Mm. But I'll tell you what, the energy, you don't know what the Rebbe is. The energy around the Rebbe was so powerful. You couldn't stay away no matter what. Hakafis, for example. Hakafis.
So you were by a couple.
Half of the women couldn't see.
Couldn't.
But you wouldn't move from 770. You wouldn't go anywhere else. I made my sure. Listen, I always saw. I had no problem. I squeezed in no matter what time.
What was it like? What was it like for the women in our office? They were dancing?
No, just watching.
Just watching, even though they couldn't see.
Yeah.
They're trying to see.
Trying. We sometimes took chances, give people a chance to go and see. But the energy, you don't understand the holiness. It's hard to explain. You couldn't move even if you didn't hear a word. The energy was so powerful. It was just, you couldn't stay away. I mean, listen to some women. What was that? In Muncie, there was a few people that said, I didn't understand Yiddish, I didn't understand anything, and I just watched the Rebbe talk. I'm like, you're in heaven. You felt Mashiach would come any minute. I always had the imagination that all of a sudden, all the Rabbeim are right behind the Rebbe, and Mashiach is here, that's it. That's how you felt when you were by Fabrengen. It's either my basement or my next door, they're building over there.
All right. So you felt that Mashiach was coming.
I mean, you couldn't help but feel that. And then suddenly the Rebbe would stand up. He didn't always do it when they were, and singing. And then suddenly the Rebbe would, look at the videos. When the Rebbe stood up, I'd be like, the energy was just incredible. Like all the lights going on,
How did you and your husband manage this living in both worlds? You're describing very vividly this world of 770, the Rebbe's world, but you were also describing earlier the world of the newspaper where you're interacting
I think that we had an effect on people because of that. Because I remember we made a reception here for Rabin. He was then
when he came
ambassador to Washington. So we invited all the Israeli, the consulate. They're all so secular. Oh my gosh! And they came into the house, and they.
Oh yeah, the reception here in this house.
In my house, yeah. And they kept saying, they're really religious. You can't believe it. Because they didn't believe that religious people are normal.
Right.
Yeah, so I think we had an effect on people.
Oh, they thought that your husband was putting on a show.
It's not that. Okay,
He has a beard, but he's probably not
but,
yeah.
Come on,
Doesn't live in Crown Heights.
He's normal, so he can't be religious.
Right.
They just kept saying, like, they couldn't believe it. It happened so many times.
Hilarious.
Whenever we met somewhere, I didn't give my hand to anybody.
Right.
So there's no. So what happened? I have to tell you. Who was it? Not Mayor. What was his name? Oh my gosh. Motigur. The general.
The general, sure.
So we're standing around talking. We always met with these people because of my husband being with the newspaper. And everybody wants to shake a hand. I don't shake a hand. So Motigur is standing behind me. Oh, and I was standing on the side like this. And they said, no, you can't shake her hand. So he went in back of me anyway. He grabbed me.
Motigur. Give you a hug. Give you a hug.
He gave me a hug from the back, I'm saying they couldn't believe that. He
thought it was a joke that you were making.
Yeah, exactly. They're all.
That's funny. But was it?
I have to tell you something. Mayor Koch made a reception for us.
Mayor Koch of New York.
Mayor Koch, yeah, right. For the Algemeiner. It was 10 years the Algemeiner. Right. So he made a reception, and we're all coming into the room, and it's a door, and he's standing in the doorway, and everybody's shaking his hand.
Right.
And you're in the doorway, you know what I mean? It's not like sometimes they just stand like this way, in the middle of somewhere. So what did I do? You know what I did? I curtsied, I stood up. Right. And I went like this. When you curtsy, how a woman does?
Yeah, by the queen.
He was hysterical. And I passed through. What do? You saw how to shake men's hands, you know. I'm saying you learn how to manipulate, how to maneuver.
No, but was it at all like difficult to live in these two worlds for you? Not at all. I mean,
I think it was so beneficial.
it just sounds so. It sounds so drastic to go
I know,
from
but you,
with Rebbe's Farbringing, and you're talking about the Rebbeim being there, or Mashiach coming, and that very very extreme kind of experience, and then you're going from there down the subway to the city, and you live, and that's New York City. You know, the opposite.
so I have to describe to you. We went to a wedding in Mexico City for a very rich fellow who invited everybody, paid for everybody to fly in the a luxury hotel, everything. There's a bunch of the Israeli government. So they have the shluchim that they have, the consul general, all these guys, secular as can be.
Right.
We're all at this hotel where the wedding is happening. And we're all sitting around, and we're sitting at the table, and the women are saying, the Israeli women, nobody ever knew how religious or not, because I wore a shaitel, but they didn't think it was a shaitel. And I was always dressed to kill. I dressed very well. And, you know, so people like sort of admired the way I looked. So I'm sitting there with them, and, a few couples, the journalists, one of them was an Algemeiner from the Yediot Achronot with his wife, and another consul general with his wife. We're all sitting around, and the women are saying, and they started to dance. There was no mechitza, but men and women were dancing separately. So this woman said, I'm not dancing with women. I said, okay. And that one, no, I'm not dancing with women. I said, so let me just ask you something. You see that girl over there? It was a beautiful girl there. I said, you want your husband dancing with her, yeah? Because he could go over and ask her to dance. You know that, right? And you would love if your husband would, because these women were so jealous because the men were playing around, you know. They knew that, nobody was safe.
Right.
We don't worry about our husbands.
Right.
But they worry about their husbands all the time. So I said, you know what? You know what Hashem wanted? To protect us. That's all. You're protected when your husband cannot dance with another woman.
Right.
They were all dancing with the women. All I had to do was say this. That's all.
Right.
And it came from a person that didn't identify as a frummy.
No, I understand. You're talking more about representing yourself in that world. I'm talking about for yourself. Was it at all a thing? I mean, it's two very different worlds that you're
Were
living
we
in.
envious of their lifestyle? I'm asking you.
Mm-hmm.
They're not envious of their lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
You know that their lifestyle is not what it should be.
Right.
You know that.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with them. I became very close with a lot of these people.
No, I grew
Their
up.
lifestyle was not ideal, you understand?
I grew up in Hong Kong. I grew up on Shlichus.
Okay,
I'm
so-
not jealous of them. It's more. I guess the reason I ask is not because I assume that you're jealous.
Maybe for very young people, it's challenging.
Right.
Because it looks so glamorous.
Right. Yes, that's
But
true.
when you're a mature woman, mature person, you know how they live. You know that this is not what you want to do with your children. Then you don't envy, or you don't, think that this is what you want to do.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm asking more because you were, in many ways, a pioneer in this regard. Most of your friends in Crown Heights probably they didn't know what you were going to.
No.
Right.
No.
There was no...
Most people were not exposed to the outside world.
So that's why
As
I'm
a matter
asking.
of fact, I felt it when the Sheikh Chabad once made a big event in Manhattan.
Okay.
And there were a lot, for secular people. It was just amazing how many people came. And I saw that our women didn't know how to deal with them.
Right.
They didn't know what to do with them. I had no problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Because you didn't...
They were not exposed to.
You didn't really have... I mean,
So you're on shlicha. The shluchim have a different lifestyle already.
Right. You didn't have a role model or like an example of how to do this. You're a girl that grew up in Georgia, and
you could call me a pioneer if you want.
You definitely were. You and your husband together, right? So that's why I'm asking. Was that difficult in any way?
Not at all. I think it was something that I think you felt.
It came naturally to you.
You felt that you had something to do. You had to live up to who you were. Just like shluchim, they live up to who they are.
Right.
If they live in Crown Heights, you have to live up to anything. But when you're a shliach and people are looking at you, what do you think?
Did you and your husband see yourselves as shluchim, or you didn't?
I don't think. My husband did whatever the Rebbe wanted.
Right.
But I didn't feel like I was a shluchim. No, I never felt that.
So but you're saying you, even without being official shluchim,
Yeah,
you
right.
had that
I
mindset.
felt, yeah, I did. I think I influenced a lot of people. Yeah. I affected a lot of people. They had a lot of respect for me. And again, I got to them only because I didn't look the part. You know.
Was it?
And I was articulate. I know how to answer the questions. I didn't push, like when I told the women about dancing. I could have said, we dance, women dance with women and men dance with men. I told them something that they knew.
Right.
Understood what I said.
Right.
So that's how they thought. How do you get them to dance? By telling them that this is the right thing to do. By telling them, you know what a challenge it is?
Right.
It's not a very good thing. And I knew that these women, I know what they were going through. Because the shluchim, the Israelis, when they came here, the guys right away,
They were busy.
They were busy. And the women knew it. So it was easy for me to, just to tell them that. And they went for it,
Very interesting. Can you? What would you say? Because you're here all the way from the beginning. You're in New York. All the way
yeah,
from
I'm
Tufshin,
one of
all
the
way
oldest. I think I'm probably the oldest member of this community.
All the way from Tufshin Yud. What would you say? What would you say changed? Did you see? Because you described very interestingly the initial kind of push that the Rebbe had to give to the immigrants who were coming to America and were beginning to take advantage of the American culture. Something that always interests me is, then there was the next generation, right? There were the immigrants who, even though they lived in America, were brought up in the old world. But then there's the next generation. There are children who are born in America, like your children, right? Born in America, and then that generation becomes bigger and bigger until they become most of the people of the community, right? What changed in your view when the community started to become more American? The Lubavitch community became more American in the sense that they were simply born here.
So I want to tell you that if we didn't have the Rebbe, I don't know what would be. But since we had the Rebbe, the next generation, the Rebbe affected them so deeply that they changed their parents even. Even the parents who came and said, you know what, I'm in business. I've had it,
Right.
I don't have to go on Mesiras Nefesh for anything.
Right.
I just want to make money. I want to be comfortable. I want to make sure my kids will have what they need. And that's it. And then the Rebbe started to work with the younger generation, and the parents changed. There was no mother anymore screaming to the Rebbe, don't send my kids away. The mothers were proud that the kids went away. Her mother was thrilled when she could say, this one is in Arizona, and this is in California, and this one is here in Mexico, and
Hong Kong.
Saigon, or whatever. So the next generation was out completely under the effect of the Rebbe. Look at my children are a prime example. The Rebbe is everything, everything. What's their success? I want to ask you a question. We have a lot of orators, a lot of great speakers, but you have speakers who are connected to the Rebbe, and they change the world. That's that generation.
So you saw the Rebbe turn his focus to that generation. You saw a change? You saw a change?
Of course you could see it. Of course. The Rebbe was fighting constantly. Every moment. There was no letting up. There was no letting up. You know, the Rebbe's Farbrengen on Shabbos. Who went to sleep on Shabbos? The older generation was sleeping. But, I mean, I was, you know, Farbrengen? And what do you mean? You sleep on Farbrengen? Or the Farbrengen at night till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. 4 o'clock in the morning. Simchas Torah. Till 4 o'clock at the Kafis, and 5 o'clock the Rebbe was teaching a niggun. You think somebody wasn't there? I'm asking you.
Right. Okay. That was earlier on, though, right?
That was early, but
right.
even later.
Right. But I
Kasha
understand.
Bracha, people started to come from all over the country, from all over wherever it was possible to get to this, to Crown Heights.
So you felt as you're raising your children and seeing this new generation grow up, you felt that in some ways the Rebbe was now focusing on them in a new way.
He couldn't work with the older people.
Mm.
You understand? They were entrenched, and they were, you know, like immigrants. You have to work with people who are solid. They don't have to worry about a living. The parents were doing nicely. The kids had what they needed. They didn't have to worry about not having a house, they weren't immigrants anymore. They were entrenched American kids. Mm-hmm. They had everything they needed.
Right.
And the Rebbe was asking them to give them a goal in life.
Mm.
So they went for it.
Right.
It was so compelling.
Mm. I mean, that's interesting because what that describes is a shift, meaning we're not just trying to hold on to the past and how things were, but in understanding that times have changed.
And you could see the young people were looking for people like Berel Chaim and old Chassidim to listen to them. They just want to hear what it says from Russia, who was sitting in Siberia. Tell us how you lived. Tell us what gave you the excitement in being a chassid. Mm. They were dying for this, the young generation. Mm. The Rebbe gave them this chayas in wanting to be, in the goal of bringing really the goal into the world. But they wanted to know what motivated you. Sitting in Siberia, starving, eating a raw potato on Pesach.
How did the Rebbetzin factor into all of this? You mentioned your relationship with her earlier.
I couldn't say the relationship. You understand?
No,
I wish I could have had. By the way, I didn't realize that I could have had a relationship with the Rebbetzin, and I was like,
you were too apprehensive,
shy about it, right. So I didn't really pursue it. But the Rebbetzin, very powerful person. She's a leader. She was a leader, you understand? She was such a powerful woman that we don't even, people say she was private. She had so many friends. She had so many people who just adored her and spoke to her on the phone from all over the world. Mm. She had friends everywhere, but she was not a public person. So people said she was private. She was private only in the sense that she didn't walk in the street. She walked in the street, by the way.
She did.
Some people didn't even know who she was because people didn't see her that much. Right. I remember I passed by and I later realized, that was the episode. She was walking with Gansburg.
Who the
Bacher, he was a Bacher at that time.
Right.
And we passed by, she was on Brooklyn and Union, and I passed her by, and then as I passed by, she was talking to him. As I passed by, I said, that was the episode. So people she didn't come to 770.
Right.
So nobody saw her. So they said, private. She was nothing. She was not private in any sense of the word. She just was not on display. Mm. She used to go to a store sometimes, and then she stopped because whoever recognized her, the Rebbetzin, she didn't want that. She didn't need it. Mm-hmm. She didn't need anything, that kind of a thing. And the Rebbe was everything to her, but she was also such a involved in people's lives. People don't even know. She was involved. When she found out a family didn't have something, she would work, with people and make sure that they got everything. Nobody knew it was the Rebbetzin that did it. So she was involved with everybody, and nobody knew that she was the one that did it. And she was so personable. She was so articulate. She was so knowledgeable,
Right.
intelligent. I mean, there's nothing about that episode that
Right.
when people started to, well, I don't want to go into it.
In many, what were you gonna say? You don't want to say it. In many ways, she became a lot more public after her passing.
In a certain sense. First of all, my husband printed pictures of her. Nobody ever saw the Rebbetzin pictures of her.
He only printed it after she passed away.
Yeah.
With the Rebbe
there were a few pictures that they had, the Rebbetzin with Rebbetzin Chana and with her sister Chana at a wedding or something like that. But nobody ever saw pictures of the Rebbetzin. Then my husband came out with a supplement for the newspaper with 50 pictures of the Rebbetzin. People, they were chalishing to see the Rebbetzin. So all over the world, we had information that people were framing the pictures from the newspaper.
And this was with the Rebbe's request?
The Rebbe did not request it, but when my husband printed it, the Rebbe called him in on Yechidus, gave him $470, the amount.
Right.
And thanked him for printing this. Now, my husband was going to come out with a second supplement, but there were people who were saying that Rebbe is a private person. How dare you? My husband came to 770. They attacked him. How dare you print pictures of the Rebbe? She's such a private person, and all that. And then the Rebbe calls him in and gives him the money and thanks him. He was going to come out with another supplement. The Rebbe asked him not to do it. He said, because when people make from a tafel and ikar, we don't want to be there.
You're saying that people were getting too carried away with it?
People were criticizing. And they wrote to the Rebbe, how dare he?
Right.
There twice that they wanted to kill him. Once when the Rebbe, when he sent a picture of the Rebbe whistling. And
you're saying which sparked the whole Satmar thing, that whole when people got very upset. People got who wanted to kill him? Not Lubavitchers.
Lubavitcher.
They got upset because other people got upset. Why did the Lubavitchers get upset? Because the Satmar got upset, or they got upset without the Satmar?
Lubavitcher don't know. The people that got upset with my husband don't understand what a Rebbe is. You understand? You know, I want to tell you, if we're not allowed to see that picture
of the Rebbe whistling,
we wouldn't see it.
But thousands of people saw it at the Fabringen.
I know, right? Exactly.
It wasn't like a picture through the keyhole.
So I know. So they said, you're embarrassed. What did they say, by the way? Lubavitcher, not Satmar.
Right.
They said, you're embarrassed. Hundreds of thousands of chassidim all over the world with a picture of the Rebbe whistling. Do you understand what they're saying? That when the Rebbe is whistling, it's embarrassing.
To the chassidim. Did
you hear the sikha on Purim that the Rebbe spoke? On Maaseh mit Pfeifen?
I didn't hear it.
Oh.
That was to explain the whistling, or why that was when he whistled, or that was to explain.
Okay.
Tell me the story.
The thing happened in Cheshvan.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband printed the picture.
The Rebbe was encouraging someone to whistle at a Fabringen.
He just went like this, so they started to whistle.
Right.
And Freiden got the picture. My husband put it like.
Why? What was his inspiration? He thought it was interesting. A journalist.
You know what?
A journalist, yeah.
First of all, he's a journalist, but first of all, he's a chassid.
Right.
And he knew that this had to be printed. I don't know why. I myself would question it. But he knew what was the right thing to do.
Okay.
How do we know it was the right thing to do?
Well,
exactly.
Right.
So Cheshvan, this happened. The tumult, they were crazy. My husband went to shul, and 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, he's home. He said, they wanted to kill me. So he never came home. They wanted to kill me, so he came home. Subsequently, he wrote about it. he said how people, Chassidim, were saying that the whistling was this is what kept us alive, they said, in prison, in Siberia.
The
The
whistling.
excitement, what a Rebbe does. So the whistling was a representation of the Welt. You know what I say in English? There's no such a word.
Yeah.
The pfeifen of the Welt.
There are words, but they're not.
Whistle at the world.
They're not very nice.
Yeah. So, and also he printed a letter that the Hasidim signed by some shmegegi who didn't really write the letter, but the big people wrote the letter and had this, guy sign it, because my husband would not print anything without a legitimate signature. If you don't have a name that I know, it's not going in. Can't have anonymous letters.
So somebody wrote
the
a letter.
said, you have embarrassed thousands of Chassidim all over the world by printing this picture. How dare you? And the audacity. I mean, a whole letter. I have the whole newspaper here. So
it's such a
you read Yiddish?
A little bit, that's such a bizarre. Taina.
What is it?
That's such a bizarre complaint. That you embarrass the Chassidim, but not the Rebbe.
Okay. So then, Purim is how many months later?
From Cheshvan?
Kislev Tevet.
4 months.
Okay. The Rebbe comes out on Purim. He had about 15 sichos that Purim. It was very late for Brengen. And number 8, I think, was a Maise mit Pfeifen. The Rebbe starts the sicha. A Maise mit Pfeifen. So number 1, the Rebbe said like this. First of all, he said, maybe there's a makar for Pfeifen. Maybe there is a source. Also, he said that you know what they said? A sheikh gets pfeifed. Do you understand what they're saying? They're talking about the Rebbe.
Yeah.
A Lubavitcher.
Yeah.
So the Rebbe said, this is what they say. And they said, maybe there's a source. And then he mentioned about David HaMelech and so on. And they said, okay, either look up, and if you're lazy, he said, it's fine, ask somebody. Maybe there's a source for Pfeifen. And it was such a sharp sicha, he gave it over the head, not to Satmar, to Lubavitcher, okay?
Wow. And in the 4 months in between, did your husband hear from the Rebbe at any point?
No.
Was he nervous that maybe he had crossed the line?
He wasn't worried.
He wasn't worried.
My husband, if he did something, he knew it was the right thing to do.
He wasn't worried.
I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how he got that. Mm-hmm. He was a revolutionary. I mean, he did things that were crazy.
Mm-hmm. Did anybody ever apologize to him for a while?
Only one person, and he gave him this picture.
The one behind the camera. A person who had come out against him apologized for...
insulted him in shul.
About the Pfeifen.
Yeah, I think either by the Pfeifen or by the Rebbe, I don't remember. Mm-hmm. One of those two things. He gave him this as a gift because he says, I just feel terrible that I criticized you.
One apology.
That's what nobody else apologized.
So what was it like for you? Because obviously we haven't even scratched the surface on we're talking here about a span of decades, but to paint the full picture, what was it like for you when the Rebbe passed away and eventually the Rebbe passed away? This, you were here from the beginning. You saw the battles that the Rebbe fought in public, the Rebbe in private. You saw it. You were here through the whole thing. What was it like? What did you feel? What did you see when that took place?
You live with the Rebbe's sichas. That's what you do, really. So you don't know. You have any questions? You have questions? What kind of questions do you have? What do you do? This is. If the Rebbe wants this is how it has to be. I don't know. Before the Rebbe passed away, the Rebbe gave out a month before, Heichotzu. the Maimer Hecholzu, because it has to do, with Midian, it has to do about Achdus. The Rebbe was trying to prevent it from happening, by the way.
Prevent what from
the
happening?
Rebbetzin passing away.
You feel that he was making a connection
Yeah, there's
between
no question about it.
between the infighting and the Rebbetzins passing.
Yeah, it's no question about it. The Rebbe was trying to prevent it. And it didn't work, He wanted us to wake up and...
I mean, how do you see the story? How do you see, if we're going to frame it as a... Oops.
I don't know.
I mean...
Again, we just...
1 second.
It's my phone.
Let's just wait for it to... Unless you want to answer it.
No, I don't care who I could call them later, but should I take it off the hook?
No,
it's going to ring two more times. It's fine.
No, I suppose my question is, I mean, you're an editor, a journalist. If you tell the story of Lubavitch in America, how do you describe that story? Is it a story that had a
about the Rebbe and the Rebbe's, the passing?
Well, no, the whole story of Lubavitch coming to America. It starts off with such power and energy and hope and optimism. Is it in the end a sad story? Is it a happy story? How do you describe this story of Lubavitch in America that we're still experiencing now?
It's interesting that you would think that Rebbetzin passed away, and then there was Gimel Tammuz, yeah?
Right.
And you say, oh, okay, they tried. Right. Do you realize what an awakening there is in the world because of this? Do you know that nobody stopped anything? Do you know that Shlich has doubled and tripled? Do you know that the outside world is like everybody who doesn't talk about Mashiach, who doesn't talk about the Rebbe, who doesn't go to the oil?
Right.
You have stories this is what the Rebbe is doing. When the Rebbe says about the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe is not only alive, he's more alive than before. The Rebbe is saying it. Well, you can't apply that? That's what it is. That's what I'm saying. We live with the Rebbe's words. We don't live with our own ideas of how do you think what this happened? Can we help it? We can't help it. What we can do in our power is how do we deal with things? Where do we get our guidance? Where do we get our information? From the Rebbe. The Rebbe prepared every single question to be answered. The Rebbe spoke about the Frierdiker Rebbe. If you would hear, sir, what would you say?
Right.
What would you say? Everything that he said about the Frierdiker Rebbe is exactly happening. About not being able to speak.
Right.
We have to be the mouthpiece.
Right.
Talk about the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe prepared, he gave us all the tools. And he expects Mashiach to come. And this is what we're living with. And we know Mashiach has to come. It's no question. Everything else that the Rebbe said has been fulfilled. So how could this not be fulfilled if that's the goal of creation? What is the goal of creation? The revelation of Mashiach, right? That's the goal.
Right.
So what are we, giving up the goal?
Right.
And you could see that the outside world, is even more enthusiastic sometimes than we are. Do you know that? You come to Crown Heights, you don't see the excitement. Like if you go to Oil, you go to Monsey, or you go to different neighborhoods. And Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, by us it became less. And all over the country it became more. It's embarrassing to say that. I go to Simchas Beis HaShe'eva every night. And I see suddenly dwindling. And then you go to Borough Park, Williamsburg. Do you understand? When the Rebbe said that the Frierdiker Rebbe is more alive than before.
So to tie it in full circle, you spoke it earlier about how your mother would sing to you. Yeah.
How could she have? She knew that it has to happen. Like that's Geula. How do you live in Geula when you're in bitter and galus? because you know there's a goal. You know that this is not it. This is not where we're supposed to be. So my mother, without even, it was so instinctive. You understand? I'm saying, where did she get it from? So we got from the Rebbe, Mashiach, Mashiach, Mashiach. Where did she get it from? I have no idea. Because a Jew lives with Geula. They can't help it. Because there's no other option. Do you have an option? What's your option? You're either alive or you're dead. It's a very cute story. I don't know if that fits in here, but I think it's perfect.
Please.
There's a chazan. Everybody knew him. It was like, I don't know from where he was. And he was in a car accident. I mean, this many years ago, before Hatzalah, where they knew if somebody's dead or not. They thought he was dead, okay? So they take him to the hospital, and they put him in the room where there's going to be, the morgue is full, so he's outside of the morgue. And he's lying there naked, of course, with a white sheet on him. Suddenly, like my kids like to describe, a nice, healthy African-American starts wheeling him towards the morgue because there's an empty space in the morgue now. He suddenly wakes up, the chazan, and he's shivering, so cold. He says to the guy, I'm cold. The guy says, you ain't cold, you dead. So this chazan says, what a lesson in life.
Wait, this is a true story?
You're either cold or you're not cold, you're dead. If you're cold, you're dead. That's the point. You have to be hot all the time.
But this story is a true story?
Yeah.
I thought it was a joke.
No, not a joke. It's a true story. He said, well, I learned a lesson. He said, you ain't cold, you're dead.
You ain't cold, you're dead.
That's what it is. I love the story because it tells you what life is all about. You're either cold and dead or you're alive. You're hot, then you're alive.
Yeah, the hotter you're dead.
They never wanted us to be alive.
If you're not hot, you're dead, is what you're saying.
Choose, exactly. If you're not, you're dead. Exactly. Choose life.
Choose life.
And life doesn't mean existence. Life means every moment has to be alive.
I mean, did you ever think, or I don't mean to put it this way, but what does it say that in some ways it sounds like your story, it comes back to where it began, right? Your mother is singing to you at bedtime, right, with Mittenraven, and you end up there. You end up seeing the Rebbe. You end up being here, and you spend decades here. But now you have to say the same thing to your grandkids, right? Like I'm guessing you didn't think that when you were in the 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
But what do you think? What do you think about that now? What does that? What would you say is a message in that?
I said the message is that the Jewish people are an eternal people. They have never lost that feeling of being eternal. Even in the most bitter gullahs, they never lost it. And they just transmitted it to their generations. And it's working. My kids and my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren are greater than I will ever dream to be. It's amazing. Amazing. And when I look at them, somebody says, where do you get your energy? And I said, it's from the love of my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. Just thinking about them, just being with them, gives me my life. I mean, it's just so inspiring, so wonderful. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. And the children feel what I say. Because when they speak about me, they say things I say like, what are you saying? It's not me. You're not talking about me. But they feel this energy that I have from them. It's just, Hashem is so good to me. I mean, the Rebbe is blessing me every moment. He gave me such bracha, such blessings, that I live with all these blessings all the time.
That's so beautiful. And I think it's a beautiful way. If we have to end, I think it's a beautiful way to end. It's been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you very much again for making the time.
Thank you. I didn't know you were related.
Yes.
I didn't put together often.
It's been a pleasure. Yeah. I knew that we were distantly related. I also didn't realize the exact.
Yeah, it's not so distant, by the way.
No. Well, my
But Sheva's my first cousin.
first cousin. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she grew up with you in Georgia.
Yeah.
What a small world in the end.
Yeah, she was a baby.
She's younger than you.
Much younger.
Much younger.
Yeah. I don't know, let's see. Yeah, she must have been 3 maybe, and I was 10.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know.
She was a baby.
I don't know how old she is. I know I'm the oldest person that I know. So, whenever I want to get an advantage, I said, age before beauty.
All right. The music for this podcast comes from the album Repentance Doors by Oren Sor Nadav Vachar and is used with their permission.